You don't need permission. Introduction. For decades, we've been taught to seek approval, to follow paths paved by others, and to silence the wild parts of ourselves in the name of fitting in. But here's a truth that will change everything. You don't need permission. Not from your family, not from your boss, not from your past, and certainly not from a world that often misunderstands the power of authentic living. This book is an invitation to shatter those invisible cages, to burn the rulebook of shoulds and can'ts, and to reclaim your birthright, the freedom to be unapologetically, courageously, and deeply yourself. Drawing on stories of real people who faced their fears and rewrote their destinies, combined with timeless wisdom and practical insights, this book will guide you through the transformative process of recognizing your own power and breaking free from the shackles of permission. It's not about rebellion for rebellion's sake. It's about reclaiming your soul's voice and stepping into a life that feels true and alive. So if you're ready to stop waiting and start living, turn the page. The door was never locked. You just need to walk through it. Chapter 1. The Cage You Forgot. You built. It starts small. The way you lower your voice in a meeting. The way you laugh at a joke that doesn't land. The way you shrink a little when someone interrupts you and you don't speak up because you don't want to be difficult. Madison, a graphic designer in Denver, didn't notice it at first either. She was just trying to be easy to work with, helpful, agreeable, likable, but over the years, her spirit grew quiet, like a once bold color now washed to beige. One day, sitting at her desk, watching a younger coworker speak with unapologetic fire, she felt something sharp rise in her chest. Not envy, but grief for all the time she'd silenced herself. That was the moment she realized the cage wasn't made by anyone else. It was self-built, brick by invisible brick, held together by the mortar of old beliefs. Don't stand out too much. Don't make people uncomfortable. Don't be too proud. We learn to stay small so early that by adulthood, shrinking feels like safety, but it's not. It's a slow erasure. The truth is, most of the limitations we think we're trapped in are held in place by stories we never chose but still believe. That we need credentials to speak, applause to feel valid, permission to act. We don't, you don't, and you never did. Your life is not a performance, and your voice is not a favor to the world. It's a force. You weren't born asking for permission. You learned to beg for it when people praised obedience over originality. But that's not where your power lives. It lives in the moment you stop asking who you're allowed to be and start becoming who you already are. It's in the choice to take up space without apology. It's in the breath you take before speaking, a truth no one else will say. It's in walking out of the mental room they told you was safe, but secretly kept you from yourself. And yes, it might cost you things: approval, predictability, comfort. But what it gives back is so much louder: freedom, alignment, self-respect. You can't fully show up to your life while waiting for someone else to greenlight your existence. The key was never in their hands. It's been in your palm, clenched tight, hiding in plain sight beneath the fear of being too much. That too much for who? For what version of life that demands you erase yourself to be accepted? Burn that version. Choose one that begins with your voice, your fire, your fullness. This chapter, this moment, is the one where you stop holding your breath and start living like the walls around you were never real. Chapter 2. They lied about worthiness. Aiden always believed he had to earn his place at the dinner table. In relationships, even in his own skin. Growing up, he was praised when he achieved, ignored when he rested, and scolded when he cried. So he learned early that love was conditional and presence had a price. By the time he turned 30, success was his armor, but inside, he was starving for something softer proof. he didn't have to prove himself to be enough. This lie about worthiness runs deep in our culture. It's in the way we compliment productivity over peace, resilience over rest, and appearance over authenticity. It tells us that we'll be worthy once we're thinner, richer, partnered, promoted, healed, or more spiritually together. And so we hustle not for joy, but for permission to belong. But here's the truth. They don't teach in schools or even in many families. Worth is not earned, it's remembered. You were born with it. Before any job title, follower count, GPA, trauma, or flaw, you had worth like a birthright, pure, unshaken, permanent. The world will try to sell you worth through things you can buy, fix, or change, but true worth isn't transactional. It's intrinsic. You don't become worthy because someone sees your value. You become powerful when you stop needing them. 2. The lie of unworthiness is often passed down by well-meaning people who never felt enough themselves. So they measure love in achievements and withdraw affection when you're too much, too loud, too emotional, or too honest. But we're not meant to live our whole lives trying to be palatable. We're meant to crack open the myth that healing makes you worthy, because even in your mess, your confusion, your sacred chaos, you are already whole. The journey is not about becoming worthy. It's about unbecoming the false identities you wore just to feel accepted. You don't need to wait until you're healed to love yourself, or until you're successful to take up space. Your presence right now, in this breath, is the evidence of your worth. And if someone can't see it, that doesn't mean it's not there. It means they were never qualified to judge you in the first place. Your worth is not up for negotiation, debate, or delay. It's a quiet flame, unshaken by rejection, undimmed by shame, and untouched by failure. Chapter 3. Burn the rulebook they gave you. When Jason left his high-paying job at 35 to open a tiny woodshop in his garage, people looked at him like he'd gone mad. Why would anyone throw away success for something so uncertain? But what they didn't understand is that he wasn't throwing his life away. He was finally picking it up. The rules he had followed all his life, get the degree, land the title, climb the ladder, were built for someone else's dream, and every time he obeyed them, he moved further from himself. We are raised on invisible rule books. Be nice, not honest. Be humble, not bold. Be patient, not powerful. These rules are passed down like recipes, but the ingredients don't feed your soul, they starve it. We're told to color inside the lines, but never asked if the picture is even ours. The truth is, most people are following paths they didn't choose, building lives around expectations they didn't question, and wondering why they feel so empty. The rulebook you inherited wasn't designed to liberate you. It was designed to maintain comfort, to reward obedience, to prevent disruption, and it worked. Until it didn't. Because the real you, the burning, alive, soul-deep you, cannot thrive in a life built from someone else's blueprint. Burning that rulebook doesn't mean chaos. It means clarity. It means realizing that there is no right way, only your way. It means daring to trust your own compass more than someone else's map. It means knowing that success isn't a salary, happiness isn't performance, and love doesn't come from perfection. To burn the rulebook is to admit that you were never broken, just misdirected. It's not rebellion for the sake of being difficult. It's rebellion for the sake of being whole. And yes, it will cost you the comfort of approval, the illusion of safety, the praise of the crowd. But what you gain is worth everything. Your truth, your peace, your power. So let it burn, not because you're angry, but because you're ready to stop living by instructions that were never written with your heart in mind. Chapter 4. Fear isn't a wall. It's a mirror. The first time Marco stood on a stage, his palms were soaked, not from heat, but from the weight of the 1,000 imagined judgments he believed were waiting to crush him. His voice trembled, not because he lacked something, but because fear had convinced him that the spotlight would expose every crack he tried so hard to hide. But the truth is, fear doesn't show us the world. It shows us ourselves, distorted by memory, shame, and the deepest question we try not to ask: am I enough? We often see fear as an enemy or a blockade, something to be conquered or avoided. But in truth, it's a mere invitation to turn inward and notice what belief is keeping us small. When we say we're afraid of failure, we're really afraid of feeling like a failure. When we fear being alone, we're often terrified of facing the silence that echoes our buried unworthiness. Fear reflects not the threat outside of us, but the story inside of us, and most of those stories were planted in moments we didn't choose: a parent's criticism, a teacher's sarcasm, a heartbreak that told us our love was too much or not enough. But the brilliance hidden in fear is that it always points to the exact place where freedom is possible, like emotional GPS, directing us to the edges we've never crossed. We don't overcome fear by bulldozing through it with force or pretending it doesn't exist. We transcend fear by becoming curious about it, by asking what it's trying to protect, and then gently reminding it that we are no longer the child it was built to shield. Every person who's done something courageous has felt fear right beside them, but instead of turning back, they looked into the mirror and said, "I see you, but I'm choosing me now." Fear will visit. It's part of being alive, but it doesn't have to drive. It can sit in the passenger seat while your truth takes the wheel. The more you show up in the face of fear, the more you realize it was never there to stop you. It was there to reveal you. And maybe that's the miracle. Realizing the wall you thought was blocking your path was just a reflection, asking if you're finally ready to walk through. Chapter 5. Why You Must Disappoint Others to Be Free. When Micah stood at the edge of his mother's kitchen table and said, "I'm not going to law school," the silence that followed was louder than any argument. It wasn't rage that came it was a quiet, piercing grief in her eyes, like he had dropped her dreams on the floor and walked away. But what he really did was something far braver. He chose to disappoint someone he loved to remain loyal to the truth inside him. That moment haunts many of us, not because we're weak, but because we were conditioned to equate love with compliance, approval with worth, and harmony with safety. But here's the cost of that lie. If your peace depends on everyone else's comfort, you'll die a slow, quiet death inside your own life. You must understand this now: freedom doesn't come when everyone finally claps for you. It comes the day you accept that someone you care about might never understand your choices, and you still choose them anyway. The fear of disappointing others is one of the deepest psychological prisons, because it taps into the child in us who learned love was conditional, that being good meant being agreeable, that belonging required shape-shifting. But emotional maturity means grieving the fantasy that you can grow and never rupture a single expectation someone had for you. Every time you shrink yourself to keep the peace, you betray the voice in you that was trying to rise. Yes, they might be hurt. Yes, they might not get it. But you weren't born to carry other people's unhealed dreams on your back. There's a sacred kind of self-respect that only awakens when you let someone down for the sake of not letting yourself go. And here's what the world doesn't tell you. Real love can survive disappointment. Real relationships evolve when truth enters the room, not when it's kept outside. The people who truly love you will stretch, adjust, learn, maybe even leave. But what remains will be real, not built on performance or pretense. You don't owe anyone a version of yourself that makes you ache just to maintain their comfort. The price of authenticity is the willingness to be misunderstood, misjudged, even mourned by the versions of you that made others feel safe. But the reward is freedom, raw, soul-deep freedom that can only be tasted When you walk away from the cage of constant approval and choose to live the life your soul whispers about at night. Chapter 6. The Myth of Good Enough. Tyler sat in his apartment surrounded by certificates, degrees, promotions, praise, but still, something hollow echoed inside him every night as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering why none of it ever felt like enough. His story isn't rare. It's the quiet epidemic no one talks about, the performance treadmill of good enough. A myth so deeply woven into our culture that we mistake it for truth. From childhood, we're graded, measured, compared, conditioned to believe that love, safety, and belonging must be earned with excellence, perfection, or compliance. Good enough becomes a finish line that keeps moving every time we get close. It whispers, just lose 10 more pounds, just earn 1 more zero, just be a little more like them. But the deeper truth, the one that can crack you open in the best way, is that good enough was always a lie sold to keep you chasing, proving and performing for approval that was never yours to need in the first place. Your worth was never tied to how much you do, how well you impress, or how quiet you make yourself to fit in spaces that don't recognize your brilliance. You are not a project to fix or a standard to reach. You are a being to be fully, wildly, imperfectly human. The soul doesn't care about your resume, it only asks, are you honest with yourself? Are you living or just surviving? Are you shrinking for their comfort? The moment you realize you've always been enough is the moment you stop negotiating your value with people who benefit from your doubt. It doesn't mean you stop growing. It means you grow from wholeness, not from lack. Enough is not a measurement, it's a remembrance. When you finally say, I don't need to be more to be worthy, something radical happens. Your spirit exhales. The pressure loosens, the joy returns. And in that softness, your power blooms not because you tried harder, but because you stopped trying to prove something that was never in question. This world doesn't need more perfect people. It needs more whole ones. Chapter 7. You were never meant to be small. When Jonah stood at the edge of the stage, heart pounding, he wasn't afraid of failing. He was afraid of being seen. It wasn't that he didn't know his words had power. It was that somewhere deep inside, a lifetime of shrinking had convinced him he was too much, that his voice took up too much space, that his dreams were louder than what people could handle. And this isn't just Jonah's story. It's the quiet, inherited wound of millions who learned to apologize for their light, to dim themselves so others wouldn't feel insecure, to trade brilliance for belonging. From the time we're young, many of us are praised for being quiet, agreeable, easy to manage, as if playing small is a virtue and not a cage. But smallness was never your destiny. You weren't designed to hide, to conform, to squeeze into molds that suffocate your soul. You were created with a force, a fire, a signature energy that can't be duplicated or denied. Only buried, and even then, it doesn't die. It waits. The moments you feel restless, too emotional, too ambitious, too intense, that's not dysfunction. That's divinity trying to wake you up. And the truth is, you can be humble and still take up space. You can be kind and still be bold. You can be grounded and still grow beyond what others imagined for you. Somewhere along the way, someone mistook your power for a threat, and maybe you believed them. Maybe you dulled your shine to make the room more comfortable. But you don't owe comfort to anyone at the cost of your calling. Expansion is not ego, it's alignment. When you stop apologizing for your existence, when you let yourself take the stage, the mic, the lead, the risk, you don't just free yourself. You give silent permission to everyone else who's still pretending to be less than they are. Greatness isn't a spotlight. It's a decision. It's a daily refusal to betray who you are for the illusion of acceptance. The world doesn't need more polite silence. It needs your truth, your audacity, your full height. You weren't meant to fold into the corners. You were meant to reshape the room. Chapter 8. The Day You Choose Yourself. Is a moment tucked into the middle of life's chaos when everything feels like it's falling apart. And that was the exact day Marcus finally looked in the mirror and asked, "Who am I choosing right now?" For years, he lived as a shadow to everyone else's expectations, sacrificing his dreams, suppressing his voice, and drowning in the exhaustion of approval seeking. But the day he chose himself, something shifted like the sky breaking open after a storm. It wasn't a sudden epiphany or a grand declaration, but a quiet, fierce decision to stop bending, stop apologizing, and start standing for his own worth. Choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's the bravest act of love you can give, because it teaches others how to honor you, and more importantly, how to respect their own choices. Society whispers that putting yourself first is greedy, but in reality, when you choose yourself, you light a fire that fuels your relationships, your purpose, and your joy in a way that scarcity and self-denial never could. It means setting boundaries without guilt, saying no when every fiber of your being wants to say yes to people-pleasing, and embracing discomfort because growth never blooms in comfort zones. That day, Marcus stopped waiting for permission. To be happy or successful or whole, he decided he was already enough, that his dreams mattered, and that his voice deserved to be heard without a disclaimer. Choosing yourself rewires your mind to see opportunities instead of obstacles, to hear encouragement instead of criticism, and to trust your intuition over doubt. But it's not easy. It's a daily revolution against the old scripts of self-neglect. When you choose yourself, you reclaim your power from the hands of those who never had your best interest at heart, and you finally become the author of your own story, not the footnote in someone else's. This choice ripples outward, inspiring others to do the same, creating a quiet revolution of souls who refuse to shrink or settle. It's the day you decide your happiness isn't negotiable, your time isn't disposable, and your dreams aren't just wishes. They are demands you make of yourself to live fully and fiercely. Remember, choosing yourself doesn't mean closing the door on others. It means opening the door to deeper, healthier connections grounded in authenticity and respect. So, what would your life look like if today you stopped asking for permission and simply chose yourself? Chapter 9. You don't owe anyone your silence. When Jamal's mother fell ill, he sat at her bedside, heart heavy with words he'd been carrying for years, words about his dreams, his struggles, and the truth of who he really was, but he swallowed them down because he was taught that speaking up meant burdening others, being selfish, or stirring trouble. Instead, he learned to hold his voice hostage, believing that silence was kindness, that peace came from quiet compliance. But silence is not always peace. It can be a slow poison, a shadow that steals your light while the world mistakes your quiet for consent. Every day, millions of people carry invisible weights, crushing their spirits under the weight of unspoken truths, denying themselves the release of authentic expression because they fear rejection, conflict, or judgment. The world has long told us that silence is golden, that speaking up is dangerous, disruptive, or arrogant, but this is a lie we must unlearn if we want to reclaim our power. Silence, when it is chosen out of fear or obligation, becomes a betrayal of self, a surrender to the forces that would rather see you small, invisible, and safe inside your cage. Imagine if Martin Luther King Jr., Malala Yousafzai, or Gloria Steinem had stayed silent. How many injustices would have gone unchallenged? How many lives would have suffered in the darkness? Their courage to speak transformed history because they understood that silence is never neutral. It either supports the status quo or demands change. But speaking your truth is not always about grand gestures or public declarations. It's about the small, daily acts of honesty with yourself and others, saying no when your boundaries are crossed, asking for what you need without apology, sharing your feelings even when vulnerability feels risky. When you find your voice, you give yourself permission to exist fully in your truth, and that voice is a beacon that calls to others who are hiding in the shadows. It reminds them they are not alone, that their stories matter, and that their silence is not their only option. The world needs your voice, not your silence, to break the cycles of pain, shame, and invisibility. You don't owe anyone silence just because they are uncomfortable with your truth. You don't owe it because you fear losing love, approval, or peace. You owe it to yourself to be heard, to honor the sacredness of your experience, and to live with integrity to your soul's calling. The moment you speak, you shatter the illusion that your voice can be controlled or dismissed. You create space for healing for you and for those listening in the quiet. Yes, speaking up can be messy, imperfect, and sometimes lonely, but it is also fierce, liberating, and transformative. Silence was never meant to be your default. It was a lesson to unlearn. The power you seek has been inside you all along, waiting for the courage to say, "I will not be quiet anymore." Chapter 10. Break the Inherited Chains. When Marcus sat across from his grandfather in the fading light of a quiet living room, he felt the weight of 1,000 unspoken stories pressing between them. Stories of sacrifices, silences, and a legacy. Of pain passed down like a shadow, no one knew how to escape. His grandfather's hands trembled as he recounted the struggles of a life marked by limitations not entirely of his own making, shaped by the era he was born into, by promises broken, and dreams deferred. Marcus realized that much of what held him back, the fears, the self-doubt, the patterns repeating in his relationships, weren't entirely his own battles, but chains forged in generations before him, handed down in whispers and warm behaviors, disguised as family tradition or the way things are. We inherit more than just DNA. We inherit emotional legacies, beliefs about what's possible, and fears that feel like invisible shackles. The hard truth is that these inherited chains can bind us tighter than any external obstacle because they live in our minds, our reactions, our definitions of self-worth. Breaking them isn't easy. It means facing the pain buried in your lineage, calling out the voices that told you to stay small, and deciding to be the first in your line to rewrite the story. It requires courage to look at the patterns passed from parent to child, the silence around mental health, the shadow of addiction, the belief that dreams are dangerous or selfish, and say, "Not this time. Not me." Freedom comes when you realize you can choose which parts of your inheritance to keep and which to burn in the fire of your awakening. This act of breaking the chains is not just rebellion. It's love, the kind of fierce, radical love that honors those who came before by refusing to repeat their pain. It's the promise that your children and their children will inherit. Not shackles, but wings. The process will be uncomfortable. You will stumble, feel the pull of old habits and voices that want you to conform. But each step forward is a declaration. You are no longer a prisoner of the past. You don't need permission to break free. You only need the willingness to face the inherited darkness and bring your own light to it. Chapter 11. Reclaiming the fire they shamed. When Marcus was a boy growing up in a quiet Midwestern town, his passion for music wasn't just a hobby, it was his heartbeat. But every time he picked up his guitar, his father's voice cut through the melody with cold judgment. That's just a phase. Stop wasting time on childish dreams. Over time, Marcus stuffed his fire deep inside, hiding the very thing that made him feel alive beneath layers of responsibility and practicality. That smothered fire became shame, and shame is a quiet thief that steals not just your dreams, but your sense of self. So many of us carry that same weight, our brightest passions dimmed or dismissed by those who feared what our light might do to their comfort or control. We learn early that to be good means to silence the parts of us that roar, to apologize for wanting more, to shrink our desires so they fit neatly into other people's expectations. But here's the secret no one taught Marcus, and no one tells most of us, that fire never dies. It only waits for you to stop hiding, for you to stop shrinking, for you to remember that the very things they shamed you for are the fuel for your greatest power. Reclaiming your fire means more than just dusting off old dreams. It means standing in your own heat and allowing your soul to glow unapologetically, even if it burns some bridges. It means understanding that shame is not a verdict on your worth, but a signal that you've been dimmed to protect someone else's comfort. To reclaim your fire, you must first name the shame, face it without flinching, and then, with fierce love, tell it no longer has a place in your story. It's the act of choosing yourself when the world says choose otherwise, of crafting a life that feels like a blaze rather than a flicker. The fire inside you is a birthright, not a burden, and every ember waiting to spark is a call to remember who you truly are, wild, fierce, and alive. Chapter 12. Healing isn't weak. It's rebellion. When Marcus sat alone in his dark apartment, nursing a lifetime of wounds, no one saw the betrayals, the silent rejections, the nights spent wondering if he was even worthy of love. He felt broken, as if healing was a luxury he didn't deserve, or worse, a sign of weakness. Society whispers that to heal is to admit defeat. To be vulnerable means to be soft, and in that lie, millions bury their pain, putting on armor to survive rather than choosing the radical act of becoming whole. But healing is the fiercest form of rebellion, the quiet revolution against every voice that told you to stay fractured, numb, or less than. It is the defiant roar of your soul refusing to be defined by past wounds, a refusal to let trauma dictate your future, and a bold reclaiming of power that no one else can take away. Healing isn't a straight line or a neat checklist. It's a messy, raw, courageous dance with your darkest shadows and your brightest light. An emotional uprising that says, I will no longer be controlled by what broke me. In this rebellion, you find the freedom to rewrite the narrative written by pain and disappointment, transforming scars into stories of strength and survival. It's waking up and choosing yourself every day, even when the world demands you stay small, even when old voices scream that you should just get over it or forget it, or that healing is selfish. No, healing is the ultimate act of self-respect. It's saying, I matter. My story matters. My peace matters. To heal is to break the silence around what hurts, to reach for help when the weight feels unbearable, and to look in the mirror and tell your reflection you are worthy of kindness, even if kindness was never given before. It's rewriting your inner dialogue from one of shame and self-judgment to compassion and radical acceptance. A revolution fought in the quiet moments of mindfulness, therapy, forgiveness, and fierce self-love. Healing is also a community act. It dismantles the shame that isolates us, invites connection, and inspires others to drop their masks and start their own rebellions. Every time you choose to heal, you chip away at the generational curses that whisper stay broken. You create ripples of courage that move far beyond yourself. This rebellion doesn't require grand gestures. It's in the small, persistent acts of showing up for yourself, speaking your truth, setting boundaries, and nurturing your soul. It's the radical choice to be vulnerable in a world that profits from our silence. So, if you've ever felt that healing was a sign of weakness, remember, it's the strongest fire you will ever walk through. The fire that purifies, that empowers, that sets you free. Healing shatters the illusion that your past pain defines you, and opens the door to a future where your power is rooted in authenticity, resilience, and unwavering self-love. When you heal, you declare war on the chains of your past and reclaim your right to live fully and fiercely. The question is no longer, can I heal? But, will I dare to rise in rebellion and claim the life waiting for me on the other side? Chapter 13. Be bold without explaining. Why? There was a moment in Jamal's life when he quit a stable corporate job without telling a soul, not even his closest friends or family, because something inside him burned too fiercely to stay silent any longer. People around him demanded explanations, begged for reasons, but Jamal held tight to the truth that sometimes boldness doesn't need permission, justification, or approval. It simply is. We live in a world that teaches us to explain ourselves endlessly, to justify our choices, our dreams, our boundaries, as if our value depends on the clarity we provide others. But here's the secret they don't tell you. The need to explain often masks a fear of being misunderstood or rejected, and that fear dims your power like a shadow stretching over your light. Boldness isn't about rebellion for rebellion's sake, nor is it loudness or spectacle. It's quiet, fierce, and utterly unapologetic. It's the courage to say yes to yourself without waiting for anyone else's permission or understanding. Imagine your life as a canvas, and every bold choice you make is a brushstroke of color. Some might question your palette. Others might call it chaotic, but the masterpiece belongs to you alone. When you stop explaining, you reclaim the energy that goes into convincing others and redirect it toward creating the life that feels alive to you. Boldness without explanation is a radical act of self-trust. It is saying, I am enough, and my choices are valid simply because they are mine. This kind of boldness ripples outward. It teaches others that they don't need to justify their own truths either. That living authentically doesn't require anyone's approval. Of course, it's not always easy. Sometimes the silence after your bold leap feels deafening. Sometimes doubt creeps in asking, did I do the right thing? But that's the invitation, to trust the messy, imperfect process of growth, and to know that the universe moves with those who dare to show up without strings attached. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your fire, your breaks, your boundaries, or your dreams. Your yes or no is permission enough. So be bold, be brave, and carry your truth with the quiet confidence of one who knows that freedom isn't found in approval, but in the fearless act of choosing yourself. Chapter 14. Create a life they can't define. Samantha grew up in a town where everyone's life followed a clear script: go to school, get a stable job, marry by 30, buy a house with a white picket fence, repeat. But Samantha's soul hummed to a different rhythm. She wanted to paint murals on city walls, travel without an itinerary, and build a business that felt like art rather than work. At first, she tried fitting in, following the blueprint handed down like gospel, until one day, sitting in her cubicle under fluorescent lights, she felt something break inside, a quiet rebellion against a life that felt too small, too boxed in, too safe. The truth is, most of us carry invisible expectations like chains, not realizing that when we live according to someone else's blueprint, we're building a prison, not a home. The world tries to define you by your job, your relationship status, your income, your social media image, but those definitions are just shadows on the wall of your true self. Freedom, real freedom, comes when you step off the beaten path to create a life that society, family, even your own inner critic can't pin down or predict. It means choosing the messy, unpredictable, uncharted path of authenticity over the neatly labeled box of acceptance. It means embracing uncertainty as a friend rather than fearing it as an enemy. When you start to create a life that defies definition, you strip away the need for external validation, and suddenly, your power expands in ways you never imagined. It's not about rebellion for rebellion's sake. It's about sovereignty. The fierce, beautiful courage to say, "This is mine, and I will shape it my way." This is where true creativity lies, not just in art or business, but in the way you love, the boundaries you set, the passions you pursue, and the stories you tell yourself about who you are. To create a life they can't define, you must first shed the fear of being misunderstood or judged. You have to be willing to stand in your own light, even when it makes others uncomfortable or confused. Because when you do, you become a living invitation for others to do the same. And isn't that the kind of life worth building? One that cannot be boxed in, labeled, or diminished, because it was made with your own hands, heart, and soul, unapologetically and fiercely free. Chapter 15. Permission was never the point. For years, Marcus lived in the shadow of waiting for approval from bosses, from family, from society, as if permission was some magical key that would finally unlock a life he truly wanted. He chased yeses, like a child chasing fireflies in the dusk, believing that only when someone else said he was allowed could he finally step into his own light. But then, one night, after yet another hollow nod of approval that felt more like a leash than liberation, he sat alone in his apartment and felt a deep weariness settle in his bones. A quiet question whispered from the depths, what if permission was never the point? That question shifted everything. Permission is a mirage, a false currency we trade our power for, thinking someone else's stamp of approval will make us worthy, safe, or successful. The truth is far more radical. You were born whole and complete, wired with everything inside you to create, to heal, to break cycles, to lead not because someone gave you permission, but because it is your birthright. The world's permission is a seductive illusion designed to keep you compliant, waiting for validation instead of trusting your own voice. This waiting dims your light and wastes precious time that no one can reclaim. Permission was never meant to be given. It was always meant to be taken. To stop asking for permission is to reclaim sovereignty over your life, your choices, your joy, your pain, and your power. It's a revolution in the quiet spaces of your heart. The daily decisions to step into discomfort, to own your truth, and to refuse smallness even when it feels safer. Every boundary you set without apology, every dream you chase without waiting for an invitation, every moment you say, "I am enough," without proof, is a rebellion against the invisible chains forged by the need for permission. When you realize that permission was never the point, you step into a sacred space of freedom, a freedom that calls you to risk, to create, to fall and rise again, and to live fiercely on your own terms. This freedom isn't loud or flashy. It's the steady pulse beneath your skin telling you that you are the only authority you will ever need. It means you can write your own rules, redefine your worth daily, and rebuild your life with the fierce tenderness of someone who knows the truth. Your existence is not an application to be approved, but a declaration to be lived. The real work is not in convincing others, but in believing yourself enough to act without waiting, to speak without hesitating, and to love without fearing rejection. Permission was never a gatekeeper. It was a mirage masking the power already within you, waiting patiently to be claimed. So now, look at your life and ask, what would happen if you stopped waiting for permission and started giving it to yourself? What parts of your soul would bloom? What dreams would no longer need a green light because you become your own? The path to freedom isn't in asking for permission. It's in realizing you never needed it to begin with. Your time is now.